Perfect. All right. Well, good morning, KW Prosperity. It is Friday, May 8th, and we're here for our second edition of the MREA, Millionaire Real Estate Investor. We're here again with, special guests Kurt and Megan and Dana, here with myself and Mary Beth. Last week, I feel like, we covered a lot. And when I was scanning through the MREI, one thing that kind of stuck out to me, Mary Beth, we're doing the MREA series. And in that one, you go from think a million, earn a million, net a million, receive a million.
Mm-hmm.
In the MREI, it's a little bit different because it's think a million, but then it's buy a million, own a million, and then receive a million.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we've done a lot of talking about the think a million, both in the MREA and the bold piece. I think last week we kind of covered that a little bit. So I was thinking maybe we could shift to the buy a million. And like the MREA, they talk about the 80-20 principle. And in particular, in the MREI, they're talking about the dynamic trio of investing. So CTN, criteria, terms, and network. So I thought that could be a good launching point for us to kind of start today's conversation. Maybe, for you guys who have been doing investments, what is your criteria? How do you handle the terms in terms of, offer prices, down payments, and then your network? How did you build your network to leverage other people?
Yeah.
I don't know who wants to jump in first. Sorry, I just kind of had some notes that I wanted to use just to kind of start the conversation.
I'm a fan.
You don't need to apologize, Matt. That's great.
Go. You rock. So I'll jump in there. My network was finance. I grew up on mortgages and milk. And I had so many people in my sphere of influence that were mortgage originators and owned profitable mortgage companies and were just entrenched in that financial ecosystem. And then it stemmed to our sources of business were financial planners and CPAs, and a lot of, this was in the early 2000s, we had a lot of people from the stock market come, when 9/11 happened and everything, and the market just turned dismal. We had a lot of stockbrokers come and sell mortgages. And so we had this melting pot of financial minds, and it was awesome and sometimes scary and daunting and exciting because you got to glean from all different perspectives. So I have been coached to the least number of roofs and long-term holds, and just the more planned risk. I'm infatuated with the flip concept, and Mary Beth and I constantly, threaten to do some of those. And I just do naturally gravitate to long-term holds that are just a long-term plan to build wealth. So I'd love to hear what Megan and Kurt
and as Dana said in a different call, I usually push her to do things. That stuck with me. You said that I get these, you get ideas, I'm pushing, and I didn't know that about our relationship. But I will tell you that once this refi comes in, I will be doing a flip. So you'll either join me or not.
Flip out. I love it.
Flip tables.
You won today. It's just, I feel like, you
don't have to have that job. I think for us, our conversations have been, it's a job. And I don't think that necessarily in Dana's wheelhouse is to be the job of a general contractor on a construction project. That is definitely more in Mary Beth's wheelhouse because of my sculpture background and my need to build stuff hands-on. And then I have the resources of Godfrey, so it makes more sense. But as Mark King was saying even this morning, is diversify, but yet don't diversify too far out of what you know. This is something that you do know. If you find somebody that you do trust and you make the decision to go in and it's a return on investment, then it's thumbs up. So yeah, Megan and Kurt.
Yeah, network for me, Megan and I probably have a lot of very different answers on this part, which I think is one of the things that makes us good working with each other. But my network was music, so nobody has money, but but that's okay because
everybody broke.
Everybody's broke. But in the music world, networking is 100% of everything, and nothing happens without that. Talentless people make a fortune because they know the right people. And it's funny because I see so many parallels in real estate. There's a lot of talentless people that make money in real estate because they know the right people. Not knocking talentless people, but networking is everything for us. And we found out from an early age, early investment age, that networking for capital you need to know where you can. Megan and I always say you need to know where you can go get $100,000 right now if you had to. So when we started a business, we actually got a traditional loan when I opened a recording studio. And that was like kind of, wow, people will loan if you put the right information in front of them, if you exude confidence. And that's the thing, is like when people get into, they get scared of money with investment because it's like, oh, well, where am I going to get this money? It's like, well, if you need to make it happen, it's not that you're taking money or you're borrowing money from people as a favor. You're borrowing as a business opportunity. And as long as you can craft it like that, your networking opportunities, people should want to, if they have money, they should want to loan you money because they know you're a reliable person to invest with.
Yeah, I think I have a similar, I came from dance, like also broke. So we have a funny thing, but at this same
broke.
Yeah, probably more broke than musicians, because there's no famous dancers, like they just don't exist. So it's interesting because
J-Lo was like a fly dancer, wasn't she? A fly dancer?
She's not like a dancer in the traditional sense. Like it's so interesting. They're just
so good. Good thing you guys are
exist there. So but with that being said, we're scrappy, really scrappy. So we also know how to fundraise. I came from nonprofit world. I ran a nonprofit dance company for years. And like I was in charge of development. So I had to call these people and be like, hey, I know you loaned, you gave us $10,000 last year. Do you think you could up it to 100 this year? You want to. We're doing such cool stuff. And that was my job. And I was never talking to the actual donor because everyone's got family managers and the whole thing. So I got really good at asking people for money in that way, for something that I believed in, for something that I knew they believed in. So I got really good at that.
Can I have that for a second? Because you experienced something that a lot of people don't experience. Is you were talking to family managers.
Yes. Yeah. Because the level of wealth that we're talking here, like you never get these people on the phone. You have to go through like 4 or 5 people before you get to them.
Was there any anxiety of going after that type of person?
No, it's scripted. That was my first introduction to scripts. I was literally 21, right out of college, and got this job because I wanted to dance for the company. And then they told me I couldn't dance for the company because I worked for them. It was a hot mess, and so I ended up quitting like years later. But it was great. It was my first introduction to database management. It was my first introduction to scripting and how to get money from people. But not in the sense of like you're taking it. Like you have to explain to them like, what is it for? And it's a business opportunity because for them, it's their tax write-off. You're donating. So, and that's the only way that the company, will actually be able to function. So it's a very similar thing with real estate. It's like, you just have to give them the business plan. Like it might be your mom that you're trying to get money from, but you have to go to her with a business plan and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. And if you approach it from that sense of not like, hey mom, can I have some money? Like you have to really go at it from, this is a business. Like you can trust me because I've thought through this. And I think that's the thing that we both learned kind of early is it's totally fine to ask people for money, and it's okay for them to say no and just move on. Because if they say no, it just means it's not the right opportunity for them at that moment. And then you just move on. I do have a harder time asking my sphere for money. That is not something that's in my wheelhouse, mostly because I know they don't have it. Kurt tends to have a much wider sphere, but my strength is not necessarily finding the money. My strength is identifying the people. That's really my strength. I find things in people that a lot of people won't necessarily pick up on. And so you then learn how to communicate with them. And maybe I can coach Kurt on a way of communicating with that person to kind of pull up those heartstrings or whatever it might be so that we can approach it and actually get the result that we're looking for. So again, scripting, but also identifying your audience.
Well, and Megan, I like one thing you said. When you're talking to people, you're presenting something that's well thought out, and I think that actually shifts kind of to in the CTN, the criteria piece. So, maybe talk a little about whether it's Megan, or maybe we'll start with you since you kind of brought that part up. How do you filter potential properties and identify the greatest opportunities with the least amount of risk? Like, how do you do that to then present that to your network?
We tend to like a minimum of a 40% return. At the moment, what are we at now, Kurt? 60?
Well, that's for flips, but yeah,
that's for flip properties. Because I think that's probably that's the easiest one to quantify is the flip properties. You're just looking for a very specific return. So what am I going to pay for it? What am I going to put into it? What can I sell it for? Like it's a pretty simple like math thing. When you're looking at buy and holds, you can buy it for a price, but then you have to look at, okay, well, how much is it going to make? What do I need to put away for all these things? I mean, all the spreadsheets are in MREI for you, but you make your money when you purchase. You don't make your money later on. So you have to purchase it correctly. And if it's not a good deal, you have to be willing to walk away. I think we learned that pretty early on because there's a couple properties that we just loved and we were like, oh, it's such a good one. But like they didn't fit our numbers. Like our max was, 350 and they wanted 400 and someone else is going to pay 400, but they're going to lose that money because for us, it only made money when it was at 350. It's all numbers. You cannot be emotional about it. So I think that's like a
I think you just said the key word, if you like it, if you're in it for investment and you your situation, you just wound up buying one, right? That with the barn and then they knocked the barn down. But we could talk a little bit about that, but you liked it. And when you start to like it, that means that you're going to be willing to go to a number that the person who likes it and needs to live in it and not make money on it. That's the price tag you're going to pay. I think maybe next week we could probably go through some of the examples of, it was really helpful when you and I were on that call and we broke down and I kept asking questions as to, and how much did you put into that and what did you buy that for? So next week when we're able to go live, I think we should maybe go to a white screen and just kind of draw that out a bit. Because
we're under contract on 2 buy and holds right now. We can actually get those numbers and kind of show you what those numbers look like.
And show the difference of a buy and hold thumbs up and then a fix and flip thumbs up.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, because I think that would be super helpful. The other thing that I know in our conversation that we had was how many offers are you putting out a week when you're looking at investing? How many offers?
Well, it's not emotional. So it's all strictly numbers. I mean, we have a lot of multifamily buyers right now. I mean, I'm sure anyone who's working with investors right now is seeing these prices go just through the roof and they don't cash flow. It doesn't make any sense. And we have a lot of buyers that we have to coach on that. And us especially is you can be in love with a property, but the second you're in love with the property, it's game over. Because now you want it so bad, you'll bid and bid and bid. And then you're out of territory of actually making any sort of money. So we don't get emotionally attached to anything. We're probably 5 to 6 offers a week on investment properties across the board. So buy and holds, flips, across the board, we're probably 5 to 6 offers a week. Right now it's a little bit slower just because there's not that many deals that we're finding. But again, it's all numbers. You run the numbers, doesn't make sense, cool, offer in. Know what your max offer is and don't go above it and then move on. I mean,
you're setting rules.
If we cut the flips, I mean, obviously there's a whole thing to be discussed about the flips, but with our holds, I actually love to contrast our hold buying method to what Dana said, because I think that Dana's strategy is one that's like, it's very important to acknowledge that's like probably I'd love to hear more about like why that. I mean, you said you were coached to that strategy, the most doors under one, the least roofs as possible. And for us, just real quick as a comparison, we are not in that phase, but we know that phase is probably 10 or 15 years down the road for us. Our reasons of why we have more roofs right now is probably okay for our investing phase, and it makes sense because we're now we're just trying to build that wealth. Safety is not as big of a priority. But Dana, I'd love to hear that, like that, because we're in opposite ends right now, but there's lots of school.
And you're making a good point. Know what phase you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's seasons. I have about 12 to 15 years on you, age-wise, honey. So,
No, stop.
We do.
good eye cream. It's good eye cream and espresso. So yes, I definitely I think there's seasons and there's phases and certain goals. It's pretty ironic because I reconnected with one of my high net worth clients who owns full New York City blocks, 100% equity. And he just turned 69 years old. And he,
How long has he been doing that, Dana?
I'm sorry, say it again.
How long has he been doing
How long
that?
has he been doing that? How long has it taken him to build a portfolio like that?
38 years.
He was not born into it.
No.
Right.
No. Gritty guy. Great guy. He was definitely not born into it. He got into business with the right people and around the late 70s and early 80s, and he just saw a deal and moved forward and made sure that it accumulated equity, and he didn't use the properties like an ATM machine, right? We all have clients who have used a piece of real estate like an ATM, right? And they overpaid and they undersaved and they overborrowed and just abused the equity, right? So that's the antithesis of where we're looking to go.
You're driving a limousine right now. Just kidding.
Rough. We form habits, then those habits form us, right? So I definitely copied and pasted from, and he's the kind of guy that will look at a property the day before Christmas and say, all right, it's 2.2 and it's worth it. I'll pay 2.1 cash in about 5 minutes, right? So he is so liquid, and I think that it's from a long-term strategy. So I also grew up with not a lot at all. First homeowner in my household, you know what I mean? So, it wasn't a thing. I was selling mortgages at 19, 20 years old. And I was like, does it come in a box? I had to ask, literally. I don't come from that in the house. So I feel like that safeness also probably is a behavioral thing, right? Because at some point, someone might press the red button and say, just kidding, and take it away. It's dumb. It's silly. It's probably. So really, in terms of being coached, I've learned from high net worth investors who literally own parking garages in New York City and full blocks in Red Hook, Brooklyn, okay? So when 9/11 happened, it was a magnet to say, hey, what's across that water over there? That looks pretty cute. And then boom, it just exploded from there because downtown wasn't so sexy in, right, 2002, 3-ish. So I think it's gleaning from multiple profits, like in terms of people who really know what they're doing. And I will say, I'll shout him out, Ben Kinney. He is a long-term wealth building real estate strategy guy. Has he done a couple of flips? I actually don't know. I don't think so. So, I would invite you to listen to Would Make Give. That podcast is completely blowing our minds. I'm sure right? And I just think that, yeah, it's the
you have a club on the 15th of every month.
Yes.
We talk about the podcast. It's just a once a month thing, and we jump on and we talk about the podcast.
It's like a book club, but it's a podcast club.
Yeah.
May 15, the 15th of every month. And we just bring our takeaways. And one of the takeaways specifically to investor life is that it's okay to not be attracted to the sexiness of a fix and flip. That's like, you actually have permission to say that's okay. If you're more tethering growing assets and equity over time, and my end game, I would love to have CVS as one of my anchor tenants.
Who wouldn't?
Right? Like to have, actually essential businesses be our long-term. And I think thinking about what is essential is fascinating now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, before these post COVID, I feel like now essential is really clear.
Yeah.
So that was like a really long roundabout. I just think it's not only business coaches, it's also people who have done it right and have a model without really having it even on paper. I walked through these properties with seasoned investors and understood the questions they asked and modeled my questions after the questions they ask, and it's I really think we kind of undervalue sometimes the people in our world that have just stunted it out. And really, I mean, this man has multiple properties, 100% equity, and has a property management company who is paid, right? So it's like having a brokerage, owning the brick and mortar in the brokerage, you're building the business who's paying your, asset rent. It's just, there's so many possibilities.
We actually just started, we have a property management company now too, that we mostly are just doing our clients. And I'm telling you, right now it's like small money, but you're like, wait, I get paid what? And we pay an admin like a few hours a week to just manage it.
Imagine you had a 100-unit building inside that business.
But I think something too with the less roofs, like whenever we're looking at the flipped properties too, the other criteria for the flip properties is it a good long-term hold? So because what happens if, COVID hits and we're mid sell it and we can't, is it a good rental property where I'm still going to make my money? So I think that's kind of another way to look at the flips too, is that's another criteria for us for the flip properties, because single family home investments are great. Like they can be kick butt for not that many, like, I guess for just like one, if you need to start somewhere, like that's a good one.
Yeah, and that's actually Linda McKissick's strategy, single family holds. But I don't want to cut us short. It's just 11:29, and we wanted to be respectful of everybody's time, and we want to keep this consistent. So I have an idea of maybe even dipping into some of these great resources. Would they be willing to come on for 20 minutes and share what's inside their brain? Let's think about that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
And Matt, you want to close it out?
Yeah, I was just say one thing that real quick that Dana said, the Win, Make, Give podcast by Ben Kinney. One of the hosts, Chad Himes of that podcast, Mary Beth will be interviewing on Tuesday at 12 p.m. Or 12 p.m., right? Yep.
12 p.m.
12 p.m. on Tuesday. So Chad Himes will be there. Today we really covered the Buy a Million piece of the model, and we talked about the dynamic trio, the criteria, terms, and network. And next week we'll dive into some more. And thanks guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Love this time with you guys.
Sounds good.
Thanks guys.